Welcome to this video, which I haven't yet decided whether it's going to be like a full Neoncast episode or just like an Infinity War video, because I'm not sure how long this is going to go. See, I mean, I literally, like I've said this before, that I don't plan these too much. Sometimes I'll make a little list or I'll open a couple of links and then do it. But this time I'm really winging it. I mean, I really just hit record and I'm just going to go. I saw Infinity War twice already this weekend. I saw it Friday night and then I saw it Saturday afternoon. It's now Sunday when I'm recording this. And I tend to record these kind of as soon as I've seen something, or, as soon as possible after seeing it, because, I like the ideas to be fresh in my mind. I also don't like to watch too many other people's thoughts on something before doing this, just so I don't end up copying somebody's thoughts. Or it's always nice to be able to present your ideas fresh. This is not going to be exactly like that because, again, it's Sunday. It's been a day. I also managed to watch a review or two because I am impatient and was sort of curious to see what some other people thought. And so, maybe I'm going to end up overlapping slightly with what some reviewer that I like has said. But nobody really said anything that I don't also think myself. So let's just talk about Infinity War, which is going to have a gigantic, I think, $240 million opening weekend. I think that's like the second biggest opening ever. It's being widely praised, both by audiences and by critics for the most part. It has like a super solid Rotten Tomatoes score. I think it's like in the high 80s. It's in the like mid 90s audience score. I think high 80s is actually in some ways more encouraging score than like a high 90s, because there are those movies that enter into like critic nirvana, where like all the critics are somehow exist in this weird like quantum entangled state where they all feel exactly the same way about a movie. And many times those movies tend to actually have like strike a dissonant chord with audiences. That kind of famous meme about comparing audience scores and critic scores. Now, I'm not a huge fan of that because I think Rotten Tomatoes is a little more complicated, as are the viewing and scoring habits of people who frequent Rotten Tomatoes. But it does say something when you have a multitude of movies that have like incredibly high critic scores, because 70 or 80 is still a pretty good Rotten Tomatoes critic score. It's still certified fresh, but it still means that it's a movie that appealed to some people more than others. I think a movie that almost all critics like is typically a movie that I don't know exactly how to explain it. It's almost a movie whose target audience is critics specifically. And so critics all love it, and the audience walks away with it feeling like, I don't know, cheated or maybe bored or something like that. And so a movie that like maybe 70 or 80% of critics will say, will like for various reasons. And then, some people won't appeal to them, or it's like a more communicable movie to people outside the critic community. And I'm not saying that as though the critic community is somehow more discerning or has more impeccable taste than general audiences. But movie criticism is a thing. And so people who are engaged in that field kind of gravitate towards certain kind of conventions. And so, I think a movie that like every single critic likes is a movie that's also at the same time, it's sort of a high risk to be disliked by like half its audience. Which was a long-winded way of saying that I think that the Infinity War Rotten Tomatoes score is actually sort of indicates that it's very mass appealy in sort of a good way. And so I guess I should start. Look, this is going to be majorly spoilery for the most part because, so much of what happens in it is stuff that you don't really want to know before you go in. But I'll start from the very general. Infinity War is a very highly entertaining movie and is in itself, I think, a feat. I think that would be the best way to describe it. They managed to accomplish something here that's actually never been done before. I mean, never before have we seen a movie that functions as a sequel to so many previous other movies and functions as this kind of like, I don't know, nexus point of a cinematic universe. I mean, maybe other than like Godzilla Final Wars or something like that, you know. And, you know, I'm sure there's more sort of niche examples of things like that. But I mean, we've never had it done on this kind of scale. And Infinity War is a movie that's kind of unique because of the role it plays within this kind of cinematic universe. There was an article in the New Yorker about how weird. I mean, they treated this like in a critical way and said like it's so weird. Like none of the characters are introduced in this movie. Everything is just there, and it's very confusing. And I mean, I guess it is, but the point is, this movie functions as a movie that you really only can understand properly if you're already in on this cinematic universe. And, you know, judging by how much the audiences love it and how much money it's making, people are on board. It's not that it's this, you know, movie only for the fans. I mean, it is a movie only for the fans, but in the case of the MCU, the fans is like fucking everyone. So it's not like, oh, the nerds, you know, pushing their glasses up their nose talking about what issue of, you know, this or that comic this thing is from. It's more like, hey, that's the thing that happened in Iron Man 2, and no, they just referenced the Winter Soldier. I don't know, like basic shit that you would know if you've watched these movies. And, you know, as a culmination of that, and the fact that they managed to do that and managed to make it clean and slick despite being there's so much plot going on, and it manages to be non-convoluted and streamlined, is an accomplishment and a feat. And you know, I think three people just carry the mantle of this credit: Kevin Feige and the Russo brothers. And you know, in my Civil War review, I said that despite having so many heroes in it at once, it felt like slick and streamlined and like low drag. And this feels like, you know, they stepped up their game. You know, it feels like, you know, they try to outdo themselves by taking even way more characters and locations and plot lines and storylines and still trying to keep it low drag and slick. Almost like, this might seem like a bizarre analogy, but it's almost like compression software or like MP3s, where the point is like you want to make the file size smaller without losing any of the original sort of quality of the stuff. And that feels to me like what they're doing. They're compacting a lot of character and a lot of story into something that's, you know, I mean, long for a movie, right? Like it's, you know, over 2.5 hours long, but still consumer length movie that, again, manages to be non-convoluted, understandable, gives enough chances for practically everybody to shine. You know, it doesn't focus super intensely on everyone. Some characters have more focus than others. But enough is given to enough characters that it just feels satisfying, and it's fun, and it's entertaining, and it's one of the best, if not the best, experience that I have had watching a movie with an audience. You know what? I think that this rivals what had previously been my best theater experience ever, which was going to see The Force Awakens on opening night. This is probably comparable to that in terms of how fun it was, the swell of emotions. There's something really, I mean, you know, we none of us like to be disrupted in the theater. And when I went to see A Quiet Place, which is a movie I hadn't had a chance to talk about on this and do a review about, it was great. But the audience needs to be very quiet at certain parts of that movie, and people weren't in my theater, and it didn't ruin the movie for me. But I felt like if I had seen it as the way it was properly intended to be viewed, it would have been even more powerful. And, you know, the second time I saw Infinity War, the audience wasn't as engaged as the first time. And yeah, I felt like it detracted from it somewhat. Like the fact that audiences cheered at the right times, laughed at the right stuff, gasped at the right things, and just it's the amplification of your own emotions. When you feel something during a movie and the entire audience feels the same thing and their reaction mirrors your own internal reaction, there's this sort of amplification effect. And so you leave there with like heightened emotions because your excitement was also voiced by the other 300 people in that same room with you. And so the audience reaction was such a big part of this. And so that's, again, why I say it's like a feat. It's like a spectacle. It's almost not exactly a movie. It's a movie that's all middle. Like it starts from the middle and it ends in the middle. Which is not really a spoiler, I think, because we all know there is another Avengers movie coming after this. I think in a year from now, because like they filmed them both together. We all know that, right? We all know the story didn't just end here. And so it's a movie that's all middle, and there normally movies like that don't work. But because of this decade, and again, we're talking about a decade. Iron Man came out in May of 2008, I think May. I'm pretty sure May. So 10 years, 17 movies in 10 years, which is an average of like a movie every, 7 months or something like that, built this thing that people know well enough so that you don't have to reintroduce every character, reintroduce plot lines that were, Black Panther was 3 months ago. Thor Ragnarok was 6 months ago. Both of those movies are heavily referenced in this movie. And it's easy to do that because both those movies were highly popular. In fact, my theater had plenty of people in it, and it was clear that they came off the heels of loving Black Panther and were not themselves like big MCU fans. And their reactions to the Black Panther stuff were by far the biggest ones. And fucking awesome. Like, I think that's great. But yeah, my point is like even a lot of the plot lines, plot threads that feed into this movie come from movies that didn't come out that long ago. It's not like the last Avengers movie was 3 years ago and now we got to like re-catch up with the characters. Some characters we need to re-catch up with a little bit, but for the most part, we kind of know a lot of what's been going on. Yeah, there has been somewhat of a break, but I'm saying like generally speaking, like we know what's happened since. Like we know when the last time these people faced a major challenge was, and so we know that between then and now things have been generally the same, and so yeah, we're kind of introduced to where they are at this point because it's been I don't know a couple of years on Earth, I think, since the last movie. The other movies we saw, well, Black Panther did happen on Earth, but it was like Captain America wasn't involved in the Black Panther storyline, and neither was Thor, and he was off doing his own thing in space, but. Anyway, it's a movie that's all middle, is what I'm trying to say. And the fact that they built up this thing over 10 years and managed to overcome, not one hurdle. I would say there were about 3 hurdles that the Marvel Cinematic Universe had to get over. It had to get over its Iron Man hurdle because Iron Man 2 was not great and Iron Man 3 was not great and also triggered a lot of like fan backlash, which Marvel now are kind of famous for not doing, for being able to like avoid. And so I think that was like their big number one crisis. Their second crisis was the Thor movies, which were again not terrific, and especially not the Dark World. They were kind of losing sight of what needed to be done with Thor. And the third hurdle was Age of Ultron, which again did not live up to the first Avengers and caused a little bit of backlash, and also just it was not super well received. It felt a little bit like a rehash. It had some good stuff in it, certainly, but it didn't up the ante in the same way that this one upped the ante. But that's the point that I'm getting at. Like, they managed to overcome all 3 of those hurdles. They overcame the Iron Man hurdle by just not making another Iron Man movie, by using Iron Man really well in other movies for now. He's sort of always there, He's in the Avengers movies. He's in Spider-Man Homecoming. He's in Civil War a lot. We got plenty of Iron Man elsewhere, and it was done well enough so that the Iron Man hurdle was overcome. The Thor hurdle was overcome with Thor Ragnarok, which again is so great. And the Thor from that movie, he's the bridge between the galactic Guardians style and the earthly Avengers style content. And in order for him to function that way properly, he had to be a little more Guardian style, tongue-in-cheek, which is what they did, and that's why it works wonderfully. And yeah, the Avengers hurdle, which was the hiccup with Age of Ultron, was solved kind of in two ways. One was with Civil War, which was sort of an Avengers-ish movie, and the second is with this one. And so they followed up a less than stellarly accepted Avengers movie with like a semi-Avengers movie that everybody fucking went apeshit for, and then this, which everyone is going apeshit for. And so, again, like I said, 10 years and the ability to learn from your mistakes and improve upon your product based on them. And then it gets you to the point where you can do something like Infinity War and, all of these other people who are trying to mimic Marvel's style with a cinematic universe, DC and Star Wars, and then all the other ones that are that are sort of even less successful than those, like the stupid Dark Universe that fell apart after one movie, and I don't know what. Now there's going to be the Godzilla universe and the Godzilla / Pacific Rim universe and the I don't know what universe. Marvel did it right, and no one has cracked that code yet. Not even I thought Star Wars was a shoo-in for this. I was like, Star Wars is going to waltz in, and they're going to do their cinematic universe because of how fucking easy. You got a universe already, you got so much stuff in it, and they are not having an easy time with it. They are not having an easy time with it at all. And I'm talking as a long-term Star Wars apologist. Not for the prequels. I'm a Disney era Star Wars apologist, and already I am nowhere near where I used to be in terms of apologia. I'm very skeptical of them right now. And so, like I said, Marvel, I don't know. I don't know how they did it. But like I said, credit especially goes to Kevin Feige and the Russo brothers, who have made 3 Marvel movies so far. They made Captain America: The Winter Soldier, they made Civil War, and then they made Infinity War. And you know what? I'm going to throw James Gunn into the mix of people who deserve probably the most credit, I think, for the Marvel Universe. I don't think Joss Whedon, that first Avengers movie really showed people that you can do an interconnected universe, but that was all it was. And he had taken characters that were already established in other movies. James Gunn created a franchise out of Guardians of the Galaxy, and also, again, that vibe feeds into this and meshes really well with the comedic vibe that we already had, like in the Avengers part of this universe. And so I think Gunn deserves more credit than Joss Whedon. And so, yeah, I guess those are my general comments about this. And I think we can go a little bit into spoilers and just talk about some of the amazing, unexpected, ballsy as hell things that have happened in here. We're going to talk a little about some of the standouts in this movie, specifically Josh Brolin as Thanos, and some other minor characters that I thought were really good. So yeah, let's just do a few seconds of break, and we're going to do some spoilers. All right, so as I said, yeah, this movie's pretty ballsy. It's pretty ballsy, and it ends on a real down note. It ends with Thanos winning. Thanos, in the end, does exactly what he said he would do. He snaps his fingers, half the universe ceases to exist, and then he sits down and watches the sun rise on what he called a grateful universe. Sheds a tear, the movie's fucking over. Wow. And that fucking scene where they all crumble to ash, as I said about the theater experience, that was probably the most amazing several minutes that I've spent in a movie theater ever. The gasps at who they were dispatching, how they were dispatching them, unceremoniously, and sort of just the crushing helplessness of just they're just gone. That was really ballsy. And then it just goes to somber credits, simple white over black with, orchestral score. And then at the end, we also see, what's her name? And Nick Fury also die. And then they tease Captain Marvel, right? But the point is, like, there was no, and then it said Thanos will return. It didn't even say, like, the Avengers will return. The point was, like, they didn't even wink at you. They didn't even go like, okay, don't worry. There's something's gonna, They just, they had the balls to end it like that. And a lot of people have said Empire Strikes Back. I think that's a good comparison, as long as you remember the comparison isn't qualitative, because Empire Strikes Back is a truly great film, structured well, and a good movie in and of itself. This isn't really that, but it also, like I said, it had the balls to be a summer blockbuster that leaves you on such a down note with not even a hint that things will get better. I mean, in theory, the movie could just be over right now, and that's that. And, and the Avengers now will basically have to help Earth and maybe some other planets, like, get over the fact that half of their population randomly is now just gone forever. But, we all know that's not going to happen, right? The Infinity Gauntlet can do everything. There's going to be some time travel. There's been heavy rumors that they filmed scenes from reshot films, scenes from previous Marvel films, as though maybe they're going to travel back in time to events that have happened previously in the Marvel Universe in an attempt to reverse what happened. Now, the person I saw Infinity War with on Friday, I was going to name drop him. Now I don't know if he wants me to say his name, because he's like on Twitter too and whatever, said he caught something that I had not thought of. So Doctor Strange, when they're on Titan, uses the time gem to look forward ahead in time and examine all possible outcomes. He examines like 14 million possible outcomes. He says there's only one where they come out on top. And then right before he crumbles to ash, he says to Stark that this was the only way. And so what I think is that he perceived a course of events that will eventually lead to ultimate victory, and that involved giving Thanos the time gem in return for Stark's life, which makes me think that then later Tony Stark is going to have to be the one to ultimately sacrifice himself in order to kill Thanos, meaning that he was vital, like his survival was vital for their ultimate victory, which is why it was even worth giving up the time gem for that. But yeah, I mean, that ending was just remarkable. And we can just, we started from the ending. We can go back to the beginning, and just like the closure on what had happened in Thor Ragnarok. So this connects, directly to Thor Ragnarok, beautifully even. Like it's just the continuation. I think maybe I would even watch, like if I were watching the Marvel movies, I would even maybe watch Black Panther first and then watch Thor Ragnarok and then Infinity War, even though they came out in reverse order. I feel like if you're doing like a watch of all Marvel movies and you want it to work more on like a narrative sense, I think I would go Black Panther right after what's the movie that comes before it? Civil War? I mean, that's perfect because Bucky ends up in Wakanda. Like that movie ends in Wakanda. Now you go to Wakanda. Then Wakanda ends. Then you go to Thor. Then Thor goes into Infinity War. I think that's really nice. I think that's a really good narrative flow. That's, again, good credit to them sort of planning it like that. But yeah, we get, the immediately the kind of shocking deaths of both Loki and Heimdall, and then the introduction of Thanos, already pretty good. He beats up the Hulk, whatever. That was a really cool scene, but only later does Thanos really shine. And I really think Josh Brolin is perhaps the best thing about this. And a lot of people have been saying that this is the Thanos movie. I mean, you could really make the case that Infinity War could have been called like, Thanos Infinity War as opposed to Avengers Infinity War. I mean, he doesn't get the most screen time out of everyone, but he gets a lot of screen time. He gets stuff like backstory. He gets stuff like emotional conflict. I said this on Twitter. Aside from Magneto, the only villain I can think of who has a plan that involves, like super villain type plans, like enslave the world, kill lots of people, but who at the same time comes across like a person who can feel true grief and has legitimate human emotions and truly thinks that what they're doing is good and that they almost have, like an understandable motivation to do that. Most villains who have that have more mundane motivations. Like take the Vulture from Spider-Man Homecoming, a really good villain who has the most base motivation of all. He has a family that he wants to take care of. He's resentful of the Avengers and the government. He's kind of like Walter White, right? As I also said in my Homecoming review. He commits crime because he was denied a legitimate way of providing for his family, and so he's in a way kind of taking revenge against the people who did that by providing for his family in less than savory ways. Thanos isn't like that. Thanos wants to kill trillions. He wants to eradicate entire, halves of entire planets because of his ethos that, it's better to randomly dispatch of enough people so that the other people can live in prosperity. And if you do it entirely randomly, that's just fair. Randomly and painlessly. See, he's not even looking to like cause suffering to those people, although he does cause suffering to other people in the movie. But the thing about Thanos that's beautiful is that he is so married to his ethos that he is willing to sacrifice things that matter to him on a very personal, profound level, like such as Gamora, which we find out that he truly loves because that's the only way that he can get the Soul Stone. By the way, how great was that Red Skull reveal? I've been hearing people theorizing that Red Skull was going to appear in this for a long time, and I thought, no fucking way, and there he was. And, that's kind of cool. I thought that was kind of cool. It was like an open-ended thing. He grabbed the Tesseract in Captain America and just shot off in like a laser beam, and it was like, did he die? What happened? And so it's kind of cool to know that he's hanging out on Vormir as like a guide to people seeking the Soul Stone. I thought that was pretty neat. I thought that was a pretty neat, again, cinematic universe thing that's kind of cool. Like, hey, it's 8 years later. We know what happened to Red Skull finally. But yeah, sacrificing things that matter to him personally. He was even upset at the loss of his like lieutenants. Like when Ebony Maw dies, whom, by the way, another really sort of a more minor part, really loved. He's the member of the Children of Thanos or whatever they're called, the Black Order, the Dark Order, who has the telekinesis. He's voiced by some British actor or Irish actor. He was just great. And when he dies, which again, I'm gonna have to do a lot of like diversions here. So they killed him because of aliens. So Spider-Man was like, hey, that movie Aliens? And then they sucked him out into space. I think that's a really great running gag, running off of the Civil War thing where they take down Giant Man like in Empire Strikes Back. I think that Spider-Man coming up with plans based on like classic geek movies is a fucking great running joke. A great running joke. And like, why not? It sort of hangs a lampshade on an homage you're doing to something by just flat out being like, hey, why don't we do the thing that they did in that movie? Because, I guess that exists in this world. So yeah, by the way, we can also establish that aside from Star Wars that we know exists in this universe, I guess that fucking aliens exist in this universe too. But yeah, so Ebony Maw, when he gets sucked into space and dies, and he comes across like a henchman. He's like, I've never failed Thanos. He gives the impression that even if he doesn't remove the stone from Doctor Strange, just brings him with it. That's still like a failure that requires judgment. And yet when Thanos hears that he dies, he's really upset. He's really upset. And then he says later, I think I can't remember to who he says this, but he says something like, he says this to Scarlet Witch. He says something like, I lost more today than you can ever imagine. Like he he truly feels like the thing that he's trying to accomplish is important enough for the universe so that if he has to murder his own daughter that he loves in order to get it done, that's just a small price to pay for it. And that's a really interesting villain to me. A really interesting villain. And he plays it beautifully. Like, he really deserves a lot of credit for this and other things. I think Josh Brolin is underappreciated in general. But he's just great in this. And this, I mean, the CGI character looks great. It's rendered really great. There's a lot of emotion in the face, in the voice, in what he does. He's not a cackling villain, which is just great. I'm so happy there's not a cackling villain. And and it really, I mean, so much of this movie was hinging on whether or not Thanos was going to work, because they've been teasing him for so long. And, you know, and so often the Marvel villains have been the most oft criticized aspect of the cinematic universe, and their ability to finally live up to the hype that wasn't exactly hype, because they, you know, again, as some reviewer I saw said, we kept being told we needed to be excited about Thanos, but we were never really shown why we should be excited about him. And despite that, I mean, they managed to show us why we should have been excited for him and make us excited for him all in the space of the same movie. And so now, like, you're looking forward to the next movie, not just to see what happens, but also you just want more Thanos, right? I mean, I do. I would love to see more Thanos. Maybe a little more backstory, maybe a little more stuff that he did in the past. Like, that would be great. Maybe even flesh out some of his, if they really do time travel, like the rumors suggest, maybe they can even go back and, like, flesh out some of his previous appearances, like the stuff that happened in Guardians, the stuff that happened in the first Avengers. That would be awesome. Like, I would love that. Yeah, and so what else can be said? I mean, I could just go down the line a little and say, like, this movie was more heavily Thor-centric than I expected, especially this soon after Thor Ragnarok, but I thought it was done really well. Because I love the new Thor. I love that the new Thor is, a couple of steps more meta than he was initially. The continuation of his story arc from Ragnarok into here is quite remarkable. I've used that word already before. He has a really great scene where he's talking to Rocket in this movie and like having this, like, falling apart emotionally and trying to keep it together, like thinking about everything that he's lost and how he's literally got nothing left to lose. And it's really kind of heartbreaking. And it's a scene you don't expect you don't expect a guy sitting on a ship trying to go to, like, a space forge with a giant dwarf along with a space raccoon and a talking tree, having a scene that feels like it belongs in, like, a movie that plays at Sundance, where somebody's, like, getting all red and teary-eyed, trying to hold back, like, an emotional outbreak, trying to hold himself together. That was, like, great. That was a really great scene. And so, yeah, Chris Hemsworth, fucking terrific. Yeah, like all the Guardians stuff, as I said, Robert Downey Jr. is always great. Tom Holland, more great Spider-Man. His falling to ash scene was also just gut-wrenching. And also really good, again, a really good motivator for Tony because of how responsible he felt for Peter Parker's safety, which again was set up in Spider-Man Homecoming, another thing that was set up really well in another movie. And so this movie had room to breathe with, like, playing off of that previous content. And yeah, like Ebony Maw, again, as I said, Zoe Saldana was really, really solid. Yeah, there was no Hawkeye. There was no Ant-Man. We're not exactly sure what's going on with them right now. I have a feeling that Ant-Man and the Wasp is a movie that's going to end with Infinity War beginning. Like, I feel like maybe the post-credits scene in Ant-Man and the Wasp is going to be like Scott Lang turning on his TV in San Francisco, and it's like, oh, this thing appeared in New York, and Tony Stark is missing. Maybe, so that it can, because it's mentioned that he's under house arrest, and so is Clint. We also don't know what's going to happen in the next one, presumably, because we do know that Jeremy Renner and also Paul Rudd have shot for Infinity War, but they shot both of the movies together, and so their part will likely be in the next one. And so now you gotta go back to your like bare bones Avengers and now figure out how you're going to fix this. And maybe Ant-Man and the Wasp is because it's going to introduce the quantum realm. Then the quantum realm is somehow going to play into how they're going to undo this timeline where Thanos kills half the universe. By the way, highest death toll in a movie ever, I think. Half the universe is dead. That's what other movie has killed that many people? Like even movies that destroyed entire planets didn't kill half the universe. Yeah. Good score by Alan Silvestri. I don't know. I don't know what much else is to say here. I mean, this is going to be a shortish Neoncast episode. I see I'm right around the high 30s of minutes. I think if I can keep this going for just a little longer, then maybe it will function well as a Neoncast episode. I'm trying to think of whether or not there's other stuff that I can mention about this movie, because as I said, I just talk stream of consciousness. And yeah, I mean, look, Captain Marvel is the thing that they teased in the post-credit scene and is coming in next year. It supposedly takes place, I think, in the 80s. I don't really know the story of Captain Marvel. I assume she doesn't age in the same way that we age. If that movie's taking place in the 80s and Nick Fury's calling on her for help now, we also don't know where she's been. We don't know all that stuff. But after Ant-Man and the Wasp, and I think that's all we're going to get. We're going to get Ant-Man and the Wasp. We're going to get Captain Marvel. And then we're going to get whatever the next movie is going to be called. I don't know what it's going to be called yet. There's some talk of how the title is maybe going to be spoilery in some form or another, and so they thought they wanted to keep it under wraps at least a little bit. And maybe that's true and maybe not, I'm not sure. But yeah, there isn't going to be a ton more of stuff. And I do like that. I don't like that Ant-Man and the Wasp is a prequel because now the stakes are so high in this universe that going back will feel a little weird. But in a way, it's good that the two movies that we get before the next Avengers sequel take place in the past, so that now this is the point that we're at in this universe. And so the next time we come back to the universe, it's going to pick up right where we left off. And that's exciting. And I also think that that's what a cinematic universe like this kind of has to function like. It's almost like a serial, like the old serials. Like when last week when you left us, Captain America was fighting Thanos. And so you kind of want that. You kind of want like to be thrown back right into the story, which again, like I said, this does, if you consider Thor Ragnarok its direct prequel. Although you can, again, like I said, if Black Panther is in there in the middle, it also works because this movie also jumps around. And so you can say, like, okay, that act ended. Let's go to establish what happens in Wakanda and then go back to the space storyline. But yeah, Avengers Infinity War. Go watch it. You will, obviously, if you haven't already, because everybody's watching it. You're probably going to enjoy it a lot. I'm surprised by people who aren't majorly entertained by this. It's hard for me to imagine what it is that you're missing when you go see a movie like Avengers Infinity War, because I too like cerebral dialogue, long shots, contemplative camera work, but not in Avengers Infinity War. In Avengers Infinity War, you want your camera to do a spiraling dive bomb through a cloud of like alien fighter jets with explosions, gigantic space aliens, more lasers, and creatures with 6 arms. You don't want Blade Runner 2049 in your Avengers Infinity War, and you don't want Avengers Infinity War in your Blade Runner 2049, right? Both things can be fantastic. I love a good whiskey, and I love a good Snickers bar. I'm not going to drop a Snickers bar into a glass of good whiskey, if you know what I mean. I actually pulled two things that are actually fairly good analogies to both those things. I do think that Blade Runner is a little like a glass of good whiskey, better than Johnny Walker Black Label, which is a Blade Runner joke. And Avengers Infinity War is a little like a candy bar or like a milkshake, you know, a really, really good milkshake. Yeah, it's not exactly, you know, those of the refined palate. But, you know, if you don't enjoy a good milkshake, what's wrong with you, man? Unless you're lactose intolerant. But we all know those people are evil. I'd like to apologize to the lactose intolerant community. They're gonna dig this up one day when I'm in like political office. Neontaster speaks out against lactose intolerance. I do. That's the thing, though. I'm a very tolerant person, and your intolerance of lactose bothers me. I won't be tolerant of your lactose intolerance. Stop being racist against milk. Milk has done nothing wrong to you. And on that comedic note, if one could call that comedy, my wager's on no. We are going to end this episode 19 of the Neoncast. I am Neontaster, and you can find me at Neontaster on Twitter. The podcast's Twitter account is at Neoncast, where you can find stuff like this, other videos, Twitch streams, which I do on my Twitch channel, twitch.tv/Neontaster, and all of this stuff gets uploaded to my YouTube channel, youtube.com/c/Neontaster. And if you'd like to send me an email or any kind of comment or recommendation for stuff that's longer than the length of a tweet, you can email it to neoncastpod@gmail.com. This has been episode 19 of the Neoncast. Thanks for listening, if you have been listening, and if not, then why am I talking to you?